Howdy, everybody. How was your weekend? I spent the last 5 days in San Francisco. I used to live there, and it was great being back. The weather was very nice, but it was very crowded town because the bars are crowded, St. Patrick's Day and all that. Anyway, if you haven't been down there for a while, if you've never been there, take a drive down. It's only 3.5 hours away. Beautiful city on the bay. Anyway, so I'm back now on the computer, be grading papers, so have some patience. Anyway, today marks Transformation Day in Hollywood. We're coming out of the early and middle 60s to the literally a lot of people, not just me, many books have been written by it, the last golden age of Hollywood, starting with these films I'm going to talk about today, about 1966 or thereabouts, and then 67, 68, 69. And then we're off and running into this glorious 70s. Yes, the 70s were some of the most brilliant films ever made in the history of cinema. Now, a lot of this was happening in Hollywood, the big change in Hollywood, but also in Europe. Fellini, Antonioni, all these guys are doing their best work. Ingmar Bergman was doing his work of genius in this era. It was uh, it was a very fertile era of cinema, and people who were directing these movies believed that cinema could actually change things. That's how powerful the belief was. Um, Old Hollywood was losing its grip. Um, because I didn't understand the youth market, and they didn't know how to make movies for people under 25, and so they were losing their grip. Television had wiped away a huge chunk of the older audience. They'd rather stay home and watch TV for free. So while they're staying at home watching I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched and Gilligan's Island, the kids didn't want to stay home. They want to see movies. And so they wanted to go to the drive-ins or movie theaters downtown. It became a social gathering place. Movies were so important for our social and our collective and our humanities that they were that important. They were like literature. You'd go to a movie and you'd talk about them for weeks. What did it mean? What was it? What was it about? What was going on? And the challenging films of these times. I'm going to talk about all of them if I can. Some will go slip through. Stanley Kubrick, just to give you an example, directed 2001: Space Odyssey, and to this day, people are trying to figure out what it's about. It was that mysterious and that wonderful and awe-inspiring. And if you haven't seen it, you'd probably be bored by it. If you like Star Wars, you will not like 2001 because it's not a cartoon fantasy about space war, and it's actually about real space travel. And it's beautiful intellectual film where you have to appreciate real science, not Star Wars fantasy science with ray guns and Darth Vaders and cute little robots. This has none of that. Anyway, it was a revolutionary film. This is long before computer generated images were around, so it's all done real with models this big. The first Star Wars was done that way too, by the way. Um, for you Star Wars aficionados, the spaceships were this big, the towns were this big, and you'll see it on the documentary I'm going to force you guys to watch later next week, probably. Anyway, so things are really popping right now. We have a new breed of directors, and we're going to call them the auteur directors. Auteur is a French word for author, author of their own work. They had a personal stamp on their films. Now, some Hollywood directors had that, but they were very powerful guys like John Ford, Alfred Hitchcock, Howard Hawks had a personal stamp. You could see who directed it, Orson Welles, by just looking at the style and the content. Yes, they were hired hands by the studio, but even through that, they had a very strong visual imprint. Well, these new directors that were coming out of film schools like USC and UCLA and Columbia and New York University, they were raised on the French New Wave films, the Italian neorealism, the noir films I mentioned earlier, the 50s Cold War films. They're raised on that. Also, what raised, which I talked about last time, uh, rock and roll. Elvis was a big thing in the 50s, but the Beatles stormed the gates, folks. And all of a sudden, the young people didn't see anything they could relate to up on the big screen until some young directors said, hold on, give me the chance to direct a movie and it will get the youth market in the seats and in the drive-in movie theaters. And so directors like Francis Ford Coppola, who directed The Godfathers and Apocalypse Now, and Martin Scorsese, who started off with Mean Streets and went on to direct Goodfellas and Raging Bull. Um, Hal Ashby, who directed some of the greatest films of the 70s, from Shampoo to Bound for Glory to Harold and Maude. Um, these are groundbreaking filmmakers. Robert Altman, who started in television, went on to direct MASH, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Nashville, Long Goodbye, one of our great auteur directors, who worked within the Hollywood system, and they gave him money because his movies did well enough with the youth market. Peter Bogdanovich, who just died literally about 2 months ago, uh, s- started directing for working for Roger Corman on Wild Angels. Then he got his first directing job, um, Targets, and then his second directing, he got to direct The Last Picture Show, which is a beautiful, uh, melancholy, nostalgic look at a small town in Texas in the 50s, and the last movie theaters closing. And believe me, this town there's nothing to do in this town. And it was done in beautiful black and white, and it changed everything. Gave him a big career. It's a meaningful film, emotionally rich. No shooting and no car wrecks, boys and girls. No superheroes in capes. Just regular humans trying to survive the day, which is more heroic than anything Spider-Man could ever do. So these movies were percolating. A theater director by the name of Mike Nichols, who directed some of the most seminal films of the 70s, but also started in the 60s uh, with films. His first film was based on a play, a great Edward Albee play called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, made in 66 with Hollywood royalty, Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. Beautiful black and white, shot by Haskell Wexler. It was a new way of seeing cinema, definitely based on the French New Wave. It wasn't pretty. It's not a bunch of great looking, it's almost film documentary style, and the emotions are raw. Elizabeth Taylor never was better. She won the Academy Award for Best Actor that year, and she deserved it. She was a young woman, but they made her up 20 years older. Wonderful. He 2 years later, he directs a film that changed the world called The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman. Came at a perfect time in our obsession with the Vietnam War, and you're graduating college, and now what? What happens next? And the youth of America just we ate it up. I was a very young person. I was only 13 or 14 when it came out, and I wanted that. I wanted that life in The Graduate. I did. I wanted a sports car, and I wanted to live in Berkeley and have a beautiful girlfriend. Is that too much to ask for? Um, these are films that changed everything. Old Hollywood had lost its grip, and so this new Hollywood came in, and they came in the back door with drive-in movies, low budget films aimed at people their own age, and we ate it up. Plus, it was the era of the '60s. What was going on in the culture besides Vietnam War, which was dominant? We had the civil rights movement. We had the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Lots of assassinations, folks. This was on the backs of these movies. This is in the background of these movies. And what I'm always telling you to write about in your essays is what's going on in the culture that is reflected in these movies, and how do these movies reflect what's going on in the culture. It's really important to put that together. That's the humanities part of it. That's how important these films were to our collective consciousness. Um, and then Warren Beatty, who was an actor, pretty boy actor, but he wanted to bust out of that. He became a producer in 1967. His seminal film called Bonnie and Clyde. Yes, it was based on the real Bonnie and Clyde, who were petty antipsychotic killers in the Depression era. He made them into pop culture icons. He looked like they were living fast, dying young, and leaving a beautiful corpse, and that seemed really attractive to the youth. There was a newfound way of filming violence that we'd never seen before, and it looked really exciting. Pardon me. So these are the films that are starting to percolate the late '60s that are going to lead into the wonderful '70s. But these are the films that defined the moment. The women's movement was happening. Up until 1972 or something, a married woman could not have a credit card unless it was in her husband's name. Yes, folks, her husband had to have it in his name. Women didn't even have a right to have their own credit card. And you think, well, I got my credit card. Well, in 1969, you couldn't have one. So think about that, people who don't understand feminism. Feminism is just not about who opens the door for whom, but it's about equal rights, equal pay in the eyes of society. And of course, women were kept way down. Perhaps they still are being kept down. Anyway, and then a film that slammed the door shut on old Hollywood and opened it to a youth cultural atomic blast. It was called Easy Rider, directed by Dennis Hopper, starring Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda, who produced it. And it was the first time a movie used actually the pop rock and roll tunes of the day, uh, recognizable songs of the day, hits that are on the radio from the band, Jimi Hendrix to the band to Steppenwolf, all had songs on this Easy Rider soundtrack. Um, and it was wonderful. Finally, we saw something we could relate to, and it was terrifying. If you haven't seen Easy Rider, please do. It's two guys who make a drug deal in LA. They buy these wonderful motorcycles and they drive across country to Mardi Gras in New Orleans to with a bunch of drug money that they got from selling their cocaine. And they want to live differently than their parents. They want to live what they think is the American dream. Of course, they find out it's not out there, folks. Um, and it ends in horrible, horrible tragedy, and it shook the culture. That movie took everybody by storm. It was a $300,000 movie that made 300 or $400 million. Everybody got rich and famous off of it, and it changed everything in the Hollywood culture. All of a sudden, the old Hollywood moguls had no clue to why it was successful. They didn't have any clue to why The Graduate was successful. Why Bonnie and Clyde? They had no clue. They didn't get it. Why were the people going back into these movies over and over again? Well, they lost their control, and now younger people took over the studios, and they were giving the green light to a lot of movies. And this week, I'm going to have you guys watch a documentary. I'm not going to. It's called Easy Rider Raging Bulls. It is on. It's what you're going to have a midterm test based on it, so get ready for it. But I think I think it's free on YouTube. I'll go check it, but it used to be. Um, and it's essentially this era I'm talking about right now. I'm going to be on this era now this whole week. So we're not going to be off this era because it's that important. It's probably the last important groundbreaking era of Hollywood's history since silent films, since sound took over silent films, since the films of the 50s were combating television. And now we have full blown youth culture is not only controlling the content of the movies, they're making money at it. And when Hollywood makes money, they listen. That's what they're not the brightest bunch. They know how to make they like making money. And so these movies actually were profitable. And that really perked them up. And so then they wanted to copy them. And that's the problem with Hollywood. You make one Easy Rider that made a bunch of money, and I go make 10 more and make a bunch of money. Well, they tried and they didn't work. You want to make a bunch of money, go make Bonnie and Clyde over and over again. They tried a couple times. Um, I'm not going to talk too much about the 70s today because I don't want to yammer on too far. But please keep up in the textbook. I don't know where we are. I'd have to look, but you can find these movies in there. All you have to do is look up Bonnie and Clyde. You'll see the article. You should read about it. Keep looking at uh, how to write for movies, about movies, on your essays. I see that some people relate with their essays. It's okay to email me. You will be losing points because it's late, and that's only fair to everybody else who was not late. And so let's just say it's an automatic 2 point loss if you're late. And if it's really late, then probably just don't bother handing it in. But a couple days late, a week late, it's okay, folks. I'm pretty loose, but you will lose points right off the top. Uh, that's completely fair to the people who get their assignments done on time. I give plenty of time for these assignments a whole week to watch the movie and to take notes and to write your awesome essay. So keep up the great work. I have nothing else to add besides we're going to stay on the 60s into the 70s this whole entire week. Look at my notes, look at Canvas, look at just pay attention and be aware. We don't get a spring break here until sometime in April. And then when we come back, we've got a month of school left. So right now, I think we have about 2 months left. That's it. So we got to get through this stuff. Um, More on film later, more on cinema later. And remember, do not forget everything is cinema. See you next time when the story of film continues.